Have you ever wanted to just go back in time? Whether that be to 2 days ago when you dropped your ice cream, or to your childhood, or even to when you were a baby. This feeling is often associated with nostalgia. This is the feeling we seek when we want to re-experience something from the past. There are many shows that try to capture this feeling of nostalgia, but none of these shows can ever compare to the feeling of nostalgia from a show actually made in that time period. An example of such a show is Initial D. Initial D is a show made in the 1990s and definitely captures the 90s feel, which makes my enjoyment of it make a lot of sense. This is because although I was born after the 90s, I still grew up watching 90s TV shows like Kenan and Kel and a select few anime. This anime is set in Japan and is centered around racing. Now wait, I know some of you are ready to push the X out of the tab because it is a racing anime. But I'm gonna pull the trust me card because this anime is way more exciting than it seems. Now this anime isn't complex and it doesn't have multiple layers like anime today, but I see that as a good thing because it is easy to watch and more simple to understand, which I feel like a lot of anime and manga are missing today. Now the series is about a kid named Takumi Fujiwara. He is 18 and helps his father run a tofu shop. Takumi mainly delivers for his father's business, and by needing to get to customers' houses quickly and not mess up the food, he learned how to drive and drift very well. Now it just so happens that the route he takes is a very popular downhill location for street racers. Now Takumi also works at a gas station that his friends work at too. One friend, Itsuki, attends school with him. It turns out that all these friends that Takumi has are street racers for the Akina Speedstars. And after a series of unfortunate events, Takumi gets wrapped up into the racing world, with racing his father's car, the 8E86. Also, it seems that the owner of the gas station that Takumi works at is friends with Takumi's father. His father is apparently an old legend in the racing games, and I believe he drove the AE86 as well. Now, this is the basics you need to know going into this fantastic series. Now let me tell you why you should watch this series. Initial D, as I said earlier, is non-complex or multi-layered, but it does offer master simplicity, build-up, and engagement from the viewer. Every single time I watch a race on Initial D, I wonder how this show is able to make me feel like I'm actually spectating a race so well. The show makes you feel like you're behind those guardrails as two cars zoom past you, racing to the finish line. But before we start talking about the race, let's backtrack a little bit and talk about the build-up. Before every race in Initial D, there is a build-up. The build-ups are almost as exciting as the race. Let me describe to you the art of the build-up in this series. First, there's the challenge. Turning down a challenge is a racer's shame. So a challenge isn't a challenge as much as it is a promise of a future race. This makes the challenge all much more exciting because sometimes someone who you know could very well beat Takumi challenges him. And sometimes it is someone you never heard of from out of town. And by challenging Takumi, it shows their power level or their desired power level. After the challenge, you get the hype. During the hype, most of the time you can join in with the crew with how excited they are to see how this match comes out. But sometimes you can join in with the crew with the feeling of impending dread because someone crazy skilled just challenged the Akina Speedstars star racer. Either way, this is the art of the build-up, letting the audience member become one with the crew and become emotionally tied with the race as well. Now we can talk about the races. The races in Initial D are simple. They're simple in a good way though. because they're easy for the audience to understand. And with a racing show, you don't want the audience to misunderstand the rules. So this is why simplicity is a good choice for this series. Now let's talk about how interesting these races are. The directors of the show deserve an award, because the way they directed these scenes maxes out engagement from the viewer. The direction is so good that you will not take your eyes off the screen for a second, and your heart is always racing, because Takumi could lose. That's the one thing I love about this series. With any other series, especially nowadays, you already know who is going to win the fight. Naruto versus Pain, we know who will win that. Luffy versus Doflamingo, we know who will win that. And although these series try their hardest to deceive the audience during the battle into making them think the main character will lose, they never really fool the audience. The thing about Initial D is that you do go into every race thinking Takumi is going to win. But I would say Initial D is the only show I ever watched that can fool the audience into thinking the character will lose. With every race in Initial D, I go in thinking he will win. And then during the race, I think about how he will recover from this loss. You see, Initial D doesn't show you all of its cards, so you know what would happen. It doesn't tell you, oh, we did a 2-year training on it, or oh, this person was personally trained by the legend himself. No, all it does is show you racing. That may be why it deceives the audience so well, because the series is about racing, and racing has so many unpredictable factors about it, including but not limited to tires, potholes, overheating, engine failure, etc. With racing, there's always something to worry about, and that's why when you are watching a race on Initial D, you are totally engaged in if Takumi will win. Now, I would love to continue raving about one of my favorite series, but I think it is important that I let you guys experience some of what I experienced by checking it out yourselves. Trust me, it won't disappoint you. And if you don't like racing animes, this anime will transform you into a fan or at least a casual watcher. And if you are really into cars and stuff like that, this anime will amaze you not only with its story, but also with its knowledge of all things racing. Please watch Initial D. And you can find it on a variety of places like Amazon or Hulu. Just remember, the specific variation of Initial D I am talking about is the 1998 anime. There are other variations, including a 2005 movie, I believe. And that movie is a live action movie on Netflix. Hope you guys enjoyed this style of video, and please drop a like and subscription, and I'll be sure to catch you guys later. Thanks, have a fantastic day.